Well, yeah, we conducted a survey of over 1,000 couples who had adult children. And what we found was astonishing. 59% of people are financially helping out their children, their adult children. And of that, I mean, on top of that, a third of them, more than a third, in fact, are actually really reliant on that, to those kids, to help keep, body and soul together. So that's quite an extraordinary need that is being demonstrated amongst our particularly young adults, and goes to something at the core of the cost crisis that we're in, and how the cost of living is really affecting people.
So why do you think that is? Tell us a little bit more about what could be some of the reasons behind this.
Yeah, I think the very big one that we know, of course, is that house prices in particular parts of the country are just outstripping the multiples of income that we might have seen in the past. And on top of that, we're then hit with this cost of living crisis and interest rates rising, and that's really having an impact on affordability, particularly of accommodation. But it is more than accommodation. But that is quite a concern, I know, for a lot of the parents that I advise, who are really concerned to help their kids get on the property ladder in particular. But it's a very difficult issue for them. They want to make sure that they're looking out for their kids, but at the same time, not putting themselves in financial difficulty or setting themselves up for tax issues, for example, down the line. And that's where, the sort of advice that me and people like me can be helpful to those mums and dads in particular, and indeed the children, because, if you're receiving a lot of money from a parent, then there are potential consequences for that in time to come. If you're not aware of them, then it might, I'm talking about top tax consequences, and if you're not aware of them, you might be a little surprised down the line. So it's always a good idea to get some advice. Generally speaking, of course, mums and dads want to help out their children, and that's right and proper. We all know that. We all feel it.
Okay, so yeah, as you say, it does put mums and dads in a tricky situation, that they want to help, but how can it affect them financially? What kind of problems can it lead to for them further down the line?
Well, of course, the big thing that they need to think about is their literal affordability at that moment in time, whether they can really afford it, and then thinking about their future and affording their providing for themselves through old age and those sorts of things. And it's always a good idea for people in those situations, and we'll often advise people to go and get some independent financial advice from an IFA, from a chartered financial planner, whoever that is. But on top of that, it's also really a good idea for parents to be thinking about, well, what are the consequences of making this gift? Is our child going to move in with somebody? Are they likely to get married in the future? What might happen if they split up from that person and we've made this very big gift to them? And that's a very classic scenario. And there are various ways, one of which might be a prenuptial agreement or a cohabitation agreement for the children. But there are other ways in which a parent can actually protect the gift or the loan that they're making to their children to help them on the property ladder, for example. And those are they tend to be legal solutions. So that's where you want to come to a lawyer, think about your will, whether you've got the right sort of will in place so that you've provided for your children in the long term, and also so that you can do a bit of a rebalancing act between them. So say, for example, a parent has been more generous to one child because their financial need is greater, but they might want to make sure that that's evened out after their deaths. If they're making, if there's a financial contribution to either family, they want to make sure that they're being fairly fair-handed between their children. And that can all be done through the mechanism of a well-crafted will. Yeah.
Okay, and looking at it from the other side then, from the children's side, what more can they do themselves to perhaps better prepare themselves financially so that they're maybe not quite as reliant on their parents?
Well, that's an interesting question, and it's certainly one that I think young people should be thinking about. However, of course, you know, they will need to think about that in the context of their own financial advice. And again, I would generally direct them to other sources of that, such as financial advisors and chartered financial planners. But they should be thinking certainly about, you know, if they've received money from mum and dad, whether they should think about protecting that money from, for example, a future bankruptcy. What if they were to be made bankrupt in future? So when there is a process of making a gift by a parent, or indeed making it a loan, for example, to support somebody in buying a house, it's often a good idea for the mums and dads and the children to have a little think and get their legal advice to make sure that the way they've organised that is the best way for the whole family. That's very much something that I like to concentrate on in my work, is thinking about whole family solutions and making sure that everybody's got the best outcome from all of this sort of thing.
Okay, so if anyone listening to this is in either of those positions, either from the children's side or the mum and dad's side, and they're concerned, they've got questions, where can they go for more information and advice?
Well, of course, they can approach a firm like Irwin Mitchell. We have lots of lawyers who are what we call STEP qualified. That's an organisation that is a sort of a higher level of qualification for this area of work. And they're very people who have that training, have a particular skill sets in relation to advising people on their estate planning and trusts and tax. So I would definitely look out for that type of advisor. But there's a lot of really good advisors up and down the country, be it Irwin Mitchell or otherwise. But yeah, they should look out for a good private client lawyer to help them.